Welcome back to Party Talk, where we empower leaders in youth drug prevention. This episode is with Roger Munchian. He's the founder of Rescued Not Arrested. I love this because he explains all of the work that he's doing around the globe, how he's helping people in the juvenile justice system, just the restorative programs that he's using, helping people find housing and jobs. Just really, really impressed by everything that he's got going on and being such a small organization. So if you're in prevention and feel like you're running with a small team, or maybe it's just you, I think this episode is going to give you some hope. And the things that we don't talk about that I would really, really encourage you to dive into his book. I think it's also called Rescued, Not Arrested. But he probably is too modest to tell you certain things about what he was able to do at a very young age, being an immigrant coming to the United States, basically getting involved in the drug trade, being a millionaire while he's a teenager, then turning that around, through new choices and basically running an organization where he doesn't even pay himself, but he's making a global impact. And so really, really look up to him. And I know you're going to love this episode with Roger Munchian. Hello, welcome to Party Talk, where we empower leaders in youth drug prevention. Today, I've got an awesome guest. His name is Roger, and I don't even want to preview his story. It's amazing. He's going to tell it. He tells it all over the world. But yeah, let's just jump in. Roger, thank you for being on the show with me. And would you go ahead and just tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Well, it's a blessing to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to share my story and somehow bring hope and help to hopeless and helpless out there, especially those youth out there. But my story began with not having a very stable upbringing, and hence my youth was destroyed because of identity issues, looking to fit in. When I was only 8 years old when I moved to the projects of Los Angeles from Russian communist regime. At the time it was called Armenia, but under the Russian control. And we were lost and confused. So trying to fit in, the barriers was an obstacle, whether it be the language, whether it be the culture, even the dress way. But I think to be able to fit in and find love at the right places is key. And I didn't have that. So that kind of took me a whole different route in the world. I found my identity in the streets, became really quick, very good at it. I have a gift of entrepreneur and trafficking and sales and networking. And so I did really well, became very, very wealthy in selling drugs on the streets and just networking gangs and cartels eventually, and creating my own empire. But it all came crashing down at, and the information for the youth and others now is to share my story, that eventually these things catch up with you. Bad choices there's not if and but, it will bring consequences. And the question is when and how deep is that consequence going to be? So mine was a manslaughter car accident. And no matter how much money I had, I could not bail myself out of that mess at age 25. And eventually that was my moment of truth, where I needed something bigger than my money and my understanding. And that's what I decided, to reevaluate life, purpose, and direction, and found God. And Jesus was really the big deal in my life at the point. And I decided to start a ministry now to help others with my experiences.
Wow. And I've read your book, and we've met a couple times, but Rescued Not Arrested is your main message. And can you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing right now using your story and what it's doing for others?
Again, just to clarify, we have a unique structure of our ministry. We decided to have a no paid staff on purpose because greed and money was one of my gods in my past life. So we do have this unique structure that every volunteer serves because they have a passion to give, including me. But yeah, the message itself, Rescued Not Arrested, is my life story. I was ultimately rescued through an arrest. I mean, not the first or second, but eventually one that put me in a jam where I couldn't help myself. We kind of self-enabled, self-entitled for too long. And that hurts, actually. Enablement, entitlement is bad, especially growing up as kids. I mean, that really puts us in a bad position to fall when we can't be enabled anymore. So we make some bad choices. But again, I self-enabled, but eventually that's how I was rescued, through the arrest. And Yeah, the book, we are re-rising and rewriting and updating the book. So in a year and a half, it may be one it's because it's 10 years, it's been 10 years since the update. So I think a lot of demand up there to, what's been going on since then.
Yeah. Well, I remember like when I was reading it, I mean, it's a crazy book. Like your life was insane. I think about the shows that I watch and I think that this can't be based on real life. But then when I read your book, I was like, well, it's not based on my life, but this things can happen depending on where you came from. And like you said, when you came to, I think it was LA at first or wherever you went, like you said, your main concern was fitting in. And you found that community in a pretty unhealthy place, an unhealthy culture. And I mean, I'd love to dive in right there, man. Do you think that times have changed or are students still facing the same things?
Well, I think technology has changed, but I think we have the same problem. I think the fact that we want to fit in and be loved and belong, I think you could go back to the very beginning, whatever that looks like for you. But I think that's a common denominator for all humans, no matter their faith, creed, or background. I think we all want to be special. We want someone to care about us, and when you don't have that, you're desperate enough to take the very first option, even if it's a unhealthy one, and try to draw strength from that. I was 8, 9 years old. I mean, I didn't know better. My dad was an alcoholic. He served time in Gulag prison, Siberia. So I got tired of hearing those stories. But he had PTSD issues, and so I had to deal with the after effects of that. I'm sure a lot of kids who are in trouble, something's wrong with the house upbringing. There's some kind of a brokenness, some kind of something, some scars and abuses of different kinds, and it never fails. Everywhere I go speak, it's very parallel, these hurts of our upbringings. But that's kind of was an excuse for me for a long time. But I did, as a kid, didn't have guidance, didn't have mentors, didn't have healthy outlets. So I latched onto what I did have, or what I did understand. I didn't understand much about consequences, so I learned the hard way always. And I'm trying to be better now and not to learn the hard way some things now. My wife's real instrumental in making sure that that happens. But the reality is, every human, especially those kids, they're looking to be hugged, they're looking to be loved, they're looking to belong. And if they don't find it in a healthy environment, the unhealthy is always welcoming and inviting them.
Yeah. And what's amazing about your story too is that like you said, you'd gotten in trouble a few times before, gotten caught by the police for various things. But there was a moment when you had gone to prison, you didn't see a way that you could get yourself out. And I'm just curious, because probably people are listening are like, how do you go from a life of, hey, I'm dealing drugs, I'm using these, I'm in this environment. What is that moment like when you realize that it wasn't going to sustain you, or like things had to change? Can you take us to that moment? Or
it was not just a moment. I will say it's a process, and I think it's always going to be a process, just like our fall. Our fall doesn't happen because of one bad choice. It's a process of bad choices that eventually escalates and takes us deeper into la la land. But to me, I believe it was a culture shock, just like coming to the US was a culture shock. It was a culture shock to all of a sudden not be able to have the money and the access and the control over my life when I'm arrested and have no bond, facing capital punishment case. I think that was important because I had a ton of money. Again, I had a lot of lawyers, which is a unique situation. And I codependent on that. So I was my own God. My money was the answer to everything. And so the 1997 manslaughter car accident case was the initial start of the process. I actually got away miraculously, and that's why it made me a believer of something bigger than money, because miracles happened and I walked away from that case. It was the next case that really did me in, which was making the choice to walk away from the cartels and the network of trafficking tons of weed nationally was the hardest decision I've ever made. It was my source of income. It's like walking away from a lifestyle of yachts, planes, and everything that you want. I was 25 years old, and walking away from that, and having the freedom to not, but yet knowing if you don't, this was a big warning of something to come, and I can't keep that lifestyle going. So that was the difficult hurdle for me, fighting that situation. And many have heard, once you're involved in cartels, you can't walk out. It's very true, because a lot of times you're monetary indebted. A lot of times you know too many people, you're too deep involved, and you're a liability when you walk away. So these things were all true for me. But I had to make a choice, because I realized ultimately we're all going to die. It's like, well, I get to choose how I die. And if I'm going to change my life to be a model for my kids. And at the time I was already married, so things had happened where I got married where I wasn't previously. And so I had a new family, a responsibility. So the tough choice was, I'm going to choose the right thing, even if it means I will die, because that's the right decision. So it was a difficult, risk-taking choice, but it was the one that I had to make, because I want to leave a good legacy for my kids. Were infants. My second wasn't even born yet, but the reality is that was a choice I had to make. We all have to come to a conclusion in our lives and make a choice that we don't want this anymore. And unless we make that choice, nobody else is going to really be able to influence us one way or another. They could help us with opportunities and resources, but to make the choice that you want to change, that you don't want that lifestyle, it's going to take a drastic trial like it did my life. And then we have to choose whether we want to go back to that or not. So these are kind of the processes that I had to deal with. And it wasn't a one-day thing. It was year after year. Well, once I walked away, the inevitable happened. The ring got busted by the DEA, FBI agents. It was a big sting operation nationally. And I got drawn into that case because I was part of that organization in the past. Even though I had walked away, back to the story of consequences can still catch up with you later down the road, even if you change your life. I tell the youth now, especially in Adobe Juvie prison where we have a presence, like, look, even if you change your life, doesn't mean the consequences cannot catch up with you. And that's my story there. And so, and so I got indicted under the RICO statute, federal indictments in 2000 for the past, what had happened in early 90s of networking and racketeering and money laundering and all kinds of stuff. Some I was involved, some I wasn't, but they kind of, in those kind of sting operations, they pile everything up on everyone. Eventually, I ended up miraculously only serving 2 years in prison for that through a plea negotiation, and that was only because the prosecutor on my case had an assassination attempt on her, and she was taken off the case because she just wasn't going to let up on me. And I believe even that was a divine moment. Not that it was good that happened, but I think timing, when the Mexican mafia actually put that hit on her, because she was a very notorious prosecutor going after cartel leaders, it actually unhooked me from her clutches as well.
Wow.
But they eventually got busted. They were able to find evidence and stuff and bust the cartels, but she got off the case, which really gave me an opportunity for a second chance. I signed a 7-year plea agreement. The judge overruled it miraculously again, and I only served 2 years in Arizona State Prison, Lewis, which is in Buckeye, is where I had this whole revelation of starting this ministry to bring positive influence to people with my gift of networking and trafficking. And I tell people I used to traffic tons of weed. Now I traffic tons of Bibles and books nationwide, promoting, forgiveness, love, and healthy living. So it's been an amazing journey.
Wow, that's really, really cool. That's an amazing story. I'm curious too, because you're inside prisons, juvenile detention centers, things like that. What do you think that students are facing today, that maybe you're seeing a common theme of what they're struggling with and what they need help with?
Well, I think they're facing the same thing I was. Hopelessness and helplessness because of the brokenness in our families. Usually it starts with the family. I have to go back to that root problem. If we could be proactive and start educating the family before they have kids, how to bring up kids, and maybe going that far back and not, having these issues, or at least avoiding some of these issues that brings scars and brokenness into families' lives, at least some education before marriage or whatever. But my point is, sometimes we just can't avoid it. It's there. And so they have to deal with those scars. So I think a loving mentorship and accountability support system, but to be able to connect with kids is not easy. I work with kids in Adobe who are very hard. They actually sometimes even feel like they're doing the right thing. They're very proud to be involved, like their dad a gangster or what have you. So to break that curse has to come through trials like it did with me. I think majority are not going to learn just because somebody tells them to. I know I didn't. So I think being available to them when we have an opportunity is key. Sharing stories that could relate with their lifestyle. And that's why I think my story has been able to connect and build bridges with kids who are broken, because they're like, well, yeah, this guy's been there, done that. And so they seem to be a little bit more attentive when I speak to them, but they hardly listen to anybody else because they feel like no one really understands what they go through and what they've been through. And so I think bringing stories to them to connect with their hurt, their pain, the empathy, the sympathy, and all that stuff would be a good start with the kids, because they're dealing with those brokenness. They're still dealing with finding somebody to love them for reals. They've broken all trust factors, so there's no trust, a fiber of trust in their heart for anyone. They don't know who to trust. So it's going to be a process in any case. But I think connecting with them through events, fun events, music, food, friendship is going to be a key to get them to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, just even doing the small work that I have in the juvenile detention centers, doing Zoom sessions, sharing stories, teaching them, that, hey, you could achieve these goals. You're smart. Some of you have ran businesses before. Some of you have gotten yourself into trouble, but like in pretty clever ways. And you can use this in another way. You can have a hopeful future because you're smart, you're bright, you're resilient. You've been through more already than most people will go through throughout their entire life. And I bet having, like you said, a loving mentorship and accountability, like you mentioned, storytelling, it shows them that they're not alone, that there is hope. They can get themselves out of the situation if they have a partnership, with somebody who cares about them. And I think that's what's really rewarding about the work that we do, is seeing those students who, when you even first meet them, like you're a little bit terrified because you're like, how can I help this person? And for me, I'm just like, all right, I need to pray right now because I cannot help this person at all. God, find a way to use me to do it, because I'm at a loss. I can't relate. I haven't been through all those things. But at the end of the day, if you're somebody who's willing to stick around or to keep a connection open, where they can be honest with you and share what's going on, you can listen to them and tell them that, hey, you're not a problem, that you're not a bad person, like you're made some mistakes and we can do better. I think you're right. I think it's going to help change people's lives and young people's lives so that they can build a better future.
Relationship is what I hear you saying over and over again. It's all about relationship, really. And relationship is not short term. Relationship is an ongoing commitment. With a marriage, is better or worse, right? So we have to really think about it that way with these kids. It's got to be for better or worse, because it's not going to be all peaches and roses. These are broken people with some stuff. And it's not fun dealing with stuff with kids, believe me. But you know what? When you commit to loving and caring someone who's never been loved and cared, it's that commitment. Commitment is necessary. And you're right. I'm glad that you brought that up. Half my volunteers can't relate with some of these individuals, but the fact that they're willing to show up over and over and over and care and love and guide and bring awareness, goes a long way. You don't always have to relate to make a difference, but to love, I think, is the key. But again, there's always fine lines in those, making sure that we're not enabling while we're loving, we're not entitling while we're loving, and that there's a filter system in place so that at least the volunteers protected from all the manipulations as well. So having that on both sides of the fence, with those in mind, these kids need help and support more than ever, but they need people to show up and commit.
I want to move into something, Roger, that I know that you're doing, which is your work in kind of reentry, and trying to, help students once they are in that situation, build a better future. And I'm curious if you have any helpful tips from what you're doing in reentry that other people can model after or learn from.
Well, reentry became a big buzz in our country here in the last 6, 7, 8 years, and our state here, Governor Ducey, was looking for some partners to start with it, and we were able to step up and partner with them, and we're still involved in the reentry at Arizona Department of Corrections, Arizona Department of Juvenile Corrections, and the county systems. But really, there's 3 key components that we highlight with reentry. Our reentry, even though we are a Christian nonprofit, we have found a way to love and reach and help all audiences, regardless of faith background, regardless of criminal history. I think that's really the amazing thing about what we're doing through the reentry component, because our message is, hey, I'm Christian, but I'm not going to push my conviction on you. I'm here to love on you. Would you give me an opportunity to get you a job? Would you give me an opportunity to get you a healthy housing when you get released? Would you give me an opportunity to find you a healthy support system? So that's kind of our message to the audiences who are about to be released. So the reentry component is reaching people within 8 weeks to a year that are about to be released. And one thing that we do is kind of let them know that the reality, this is not easy. This is going to take hard work. You still got to do all the work. There's not an enablement system, if I may. That this is something that you do have to, roll up your sleeves and get ready to work hard and pursue, because this won't come in easy as you sleep. You're not going to retain any of this stuff, obtain none of this stuff. So we're real with them initially. We tell them, look, all we do is provide opportunities. You have to want it, and you have to stay clean, and you have to desire to change your life. But if you do that and you take our advice, we have green lights, and companies will hire you ASAP, regardless of your faith, regardless of your criminal history. We have places that will house you, again, regardless of these things. And we have places that will hold you accountable, whether it be faith-based or non-faith-based support systems. And we're here to help you plug in if you're interested in change and you want to commit to that. So we kind of leave the ball at their court. They have to want to drop a clean UA when they go to work. They have to want to show up to work on time, and they're going to have to want to do the job. I let them know, look, I can't do all that stuff for you, but I can get you hired. We have built relationships with company owners. We have built relationship with housing complexes, and we have a list of apartments. Those young adults that come out 17, 18, they're ready. They got to do life. So they may be youth, but they still got adult responsibilities. Most of them have no family. They burned all those bridges. So these kids really have to basically, they're in an adult mentality, adult environment. And if they don't have those resources, that support system, it's not going to happen. So that's kind of what our reentry component is those 3 things, and the foundation of the 3 is the support system, is mentorship, AA, NA, something that they're willing to commit to, that will hold them accountable, a sponsor or mentor that they are willing to be transparent with, and allow them to help them, guide them with wisdom and some good counsel.
Yeah. Well, just hearing about what you're doing gives me a lot of hope, because I'm barely in the area that you are in. And so sometimes when we're in prevention, we can hear about what's going on and think, man, this problem is way too big. And it's cool to learn about people who are, like we're in the same state, but even all around the country, who are doing this kind of work, that we're making a small dent and, like changing people's lives. And so what's really cool, and I want to just highlight this before I ask you my last question, is that you've told us about reentry. You're working inside the juvenile justice departments and systems. And so I just want to highlight too, for anybody who's listening to this and you're on the prevention side and you're in schools or anything like that, and just hearing your story, Roger, and knowing that faith is actually a proven a protective factor against not only smoking, drinking, and drug use, but even to just build resilience, because students are going to go through trauma at some point of their life. And like resilience is a really important skill. And we're seeing record amounts of suicidal thoughts and depression. And faith is one of the best protective factors. It's in the list of the top ones. And so our country can kind of say like, hey, keep that to yourself. But it's really brave, Roger, because you're saying, no, I'm going to not keep it to myself. I think it can help people. So I'm going to share it. And then, but I'm not going to push it on you because this is your decision. It's your journey. But I'm going to share how it helped me. I'm going to help you in tangible ways. Like you said, finding a house, finding a job, like they can't do that on their own. They don't have those connections. So you're doing a really great job of serving people, loving people well, sacrificing your own time, money to do these things because you believe in what you're doing. And so my last question I definitely want to ask you is, as you see like all of the difficult things, the things that students go through, what gives you hope that, we're making a difference and to keep going doing this work?
Well, and I'm going to answer that question by kind of chiming in your statement, last statement you made. Being a person that grew up in probably one of the darkest neighborhoods of our country, really not having any hope in anything but money. God was just a label. I mean, it was just a traditional thing I inherited at birth. It was never reality in my life. I missed, like I said, there was a lack of belonging, a lack of identity. And I thought I needed it in money and sex and drugs and all these things. And unfortunately, like I said, I learned everything the hard way, that it wasn't in these things that I found satisfaction. Matter of fact, until the miracle started happening, and I don't know why God chose to do these crazy miracle time after time after time to unhook me with death from death row, from life in prison. Even with bullets in my name, when you read the book, there was shootouts, people got killed. I should have been one of the guys. So after all these experiences, when I'm out there not pushing my conviction, that we want to make sure we don't do that because it's a sensitive world and how people perceive things. But I have to tell my story. And my story is I looked for satisfaction, peace, and joy in all the things the world had to offer me. And I couldn't find it, all the way to the millions of dollars. And I couldn't find it. And when through these experiences, I finally broke down and wondered if God was real, all of a sudden, pursuing that, I found the very thing I was always looking for, and I couldn't self-satisfy. And I had that peace. I had that joy. And now you mentioned, what is the drive? Well, he is the reason I believe I have the eternal drive to do something for free, to show that this is more than just money or program. This is a drive beyond myself to go out there and make a difference. And I believe as you read the Bible and Jesus' story, that's what he did. He gave his life for everybody. So I feel, you know what, that's what it's all about. The little bit of life I have left, I got to give, to make a difference. And that's when it hit me like, this is the satisfaction. This is where I found that peace, that joy, that satisfaction that I could not find in the millions, in the sex, in the stuff of this world. Hence, it became a reality for me. So faith is a component. It is the only thing that got me in a position where I was finally satisfied with purpose on earth. And hence why for 20 years now I've served for free intentionally. And he keeps out, I could never outgive him, but he keeps providing our needs more than we deserve. But again, I wanted to, chime on that because this is my life story. This is what I experienced. But again, knowing my upbringing and the confusion in this world, to hold on to something to satisfy self, I have to tell my story and why I do what I do now and why I do it for free. So hopefully that answered my drive for this. And yes, it is filled with a lot of rewards. I have to tell you though, if I was only codependent to see results, I would be disappointed. I would have quit the first year. Hence why the purpose I have in God's divine purpose is what keeps me going, because I realize I'm making a difference and I'm pleasing God and I'm doing the right thing, regardless whether it's welcomed or whether it's applied. And you know what, we do see some good results. We do have great transformation stories impacted by our ministry, but really the bottom line is that's not the thing that we hold on to move forward. We do what we do because we believe this is who we are. This is our purpose, regardless of the results and the feedback from these kids.
Wow. And that's so awesome because you're saying that God's giving you the resilience, the same resilience that we're asking these kids to have. And now you get to model it for them with the work that you do. And thank you for doing that, Roger. Wasn't that awesome? We'll see you next week for another episode of Party Talk, where we empower leaders in youth drug prevention. Have a great week.